You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans! Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and there's a lot to get to today. 4 pieces of sports news and 4 college basketball games to preview this weekend. I'm not going to talk about the combine. It really doesn't mean a whole hell of a lot. All the combine should be used for is to break ties. If there are 2 prospects that you have equal to each other on your board, the combine is when you break those ties. And you can do that at pro days also. Also, you can start back channeling with free agents. That's pretty much all the combine is good for. Although, the one thing I will say is, from the little bit I was watching yesterday, and I'll get more into it as we get closer to the draft, Brian Lewerke from MSU actually, I thought, had a pretty good combine. I'm not saying he's a day 2 pick or anything, but if you took him in the 3rd day, you could do a lot worse for a developmental quarterback. The guy puts a lot of zip on the ball, very mobile, smart guy, leader. Lewerke has a lot of potential. Okay, now on to some football stuff that actually really matters. I'll start with Anthony Harris. This was from Mike Zimmer at the Combine. He said that Anthony Harris is likely to leave when free agency opens up. Now, he didn't say that point blank, but if you read between the lines of what he said, it really sounds like Anthony Harris is going to be out the door. And his quote is from Ben Gosling of the Star Tribune. I understand that the Vikings are in cap hell, and they're probably going to have to rejigger Kirk Cousins' contract. They're going to have to rejigger a bunch of contracts. They're going to need to make tough decisions. They're going to need to cut some guys, and they need to be careful because they were a playoff team, and you want to continue that upward trajectory. And I understand that safeties really aren't that important in the grand scheme of things. Having said that, though, Anthony Harris is one of the best safeties in football. You do not let him just walk away. According to Pro Football Focus last year, he had a 91.1 overall grade. Him and Harrison Smith were the best safety duo in the league. Huge reason why the Vikings even made the playoffs. And in the playoffs, he was really good too. I know that the Vikings are in cap hell right now, but they can't tag and trade him? There's gotta be another way to get rid of Harris than to just let him walk in free agency. You'd be able to get a lot for Anthony Harris. You'd get at least a 2nd-round pick. He's gonna get a lot of money when free agency opens. I know what some Jets fans are thinking right now. If the Jets trade Jamal Adams, which I don't think is going to happen, but if they do, will the Jets sign Anthony Harris as his replacement? It kind of defeats the purpose of trading Adams. The reason why you're trading Adams is twofold. Number one, you'd be able to get a Khalil Mack type haul for him. Number two, the Jets may not want to spend an ungodly amount of money on the strong safety position, or the safety position in general. By signing Anthony Harris, you're dedicating a lot of money to the safety position. Anthony Harris could get $14 million a year, easy. In fact, he could even get 15. He could break the record. The richest contract in NFL history for a safety in terms of average money per year is Eddie Jackson with 14.6. Total value is Landon Collins at $84 million. It wouldn't surprise me at all if someone gave Anthony Harris a 6-year deal worth $90 million. He's that talented. And it defeats the purpose of trading Jamal Adams. Asset allocation is important. Just because you have a bunch of cap space doesn't mean that you should throw money around willy-nilly. You've got to be smart with it. Spend it on positions you need, and don't spend it on positions that are a little more replaceable. And I hate to say it, but that includes running back. Adam Gase has made lemonade out of lemons with the running game before. I don't want to hear about Kenyon Drake. Alright? Good luck repeating that year. I don't know what's going to happen with the Cardinals' backfield, but I can pretty much guarantee you that Kenyon Drake is not going to have the year that he had with the Cardinals last year. If the Jets were to roll with Powell and a day 2 running back, wouldn't surprise me at all. I don't mind them just cutting their losses on Le'Veon Bell. He does not look like the player of old. I was never that crazy about that signing. I thought Gase and Bell were going to kill each other. And, you know what? I was right. Although Gase is coming off like the villain here. It's not a good look for Gase here. I like Gase. But he's not going to win this PR war between himself and Bell. It's going to be interesting to see what happens come free agency. I know exactly how I'm going to handle that with this show. And I know how I'm going to handle March Madness. I'll address it as I get a little closer, but I have a pretty good plan in place. So, going back to Harris, I don't want the Vikings to just let him walk for nothing. Tag and trade him, you'd be able to get at least a second-round pick for him. Jets fans, don't get your hopes up. He's not going to the Jets. And I don't think Jamal Adams is going anywhere. Moving on now to Adam Gotsis. And this is from Mike Kliss of 9news.com. He said that the Broncos are gonna let him hit free agency. And quite frankly, I cannot begrudge John Elway for doing that. Gotsis is a good player when healthy. That's the key phrase. When healthy. He's never played more than 600 snaps in a season. And even when he played, he's never been a world beater. Now, he's a decent player. You can do better than him as a starter, but you can also do worse. And if you wanted to just have him as a backup to give your guy some rest, I don't mind that at all. But Gotsis is gonna get a decent chunk of change in free agency. He's 27 years old. Guys that age with talent get a lot of money in free agency. It doesn't matter if they're injury prone. I'm not saying he's going to break the bank, but it's very possible that he gets a sizable contract. I don't mind the Broncos cutting bait. They need to bring Chris Harris back. They also need to bring Connor McGovern back. And they could stand to improve at right guard and right tackle because Ronald Leary is nearing the end of his career and Elijah Wilkinson stinks. So I don't mind the Broncos cutting bait on him. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with Gotsis. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with the Broncos. It seems like they have their guy in Drew Lock for the future. I understand that we've said that before about the Broncos. Osweiler, Simeon, maybe Paxton Lynch. But Lock looks better than all of them. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in Denver. Switching gears to hockey now, as the wind howls outside my house. It was howling outside yesterday. I didn't expect it to be this windy. My God. Hope the house doesn't fall over. But I gotta talk about William Carrier signing an extension with the Golden Knights for 4 years at $5.6 billion. That's total. That's not average annual value. If that was average annual value, we'd have a big issue. Carrier is a talented player. He's never had an opportunity to showcase what he can do on a regular basis until this year. And he's made the most of it. Granted, he hasn't hit the ice a lot, but in 65 games, he has 18 points. And when you're getting less than 10 minutes of ice time per game, that's really impressive. I don't mind the Golden Knights locking up a future third liner for him. The AAV is very reasonable for a player of his caliber. The only thing that I'm not crazy about is the term. To give 4 years to a guy with only one good year under his belt is a little risky, but if you're sold on this kid, and look, he has talent, that's undeniable. If you're sold on him, it makes sense to lock him up. I don't mind this deal at all for the Golden Knights. Speaking of extensions, there was a baseball one, and this could be the first of a bunch of pre-arbitration extensions. That was a rumor that Jeff Passan had passed along a while ago, that we could see an influx of those in the coming days, and let's see if this is the start of that. The Brewers locked up Freddie Peralta for 5 years at $15.5 million. That's $3.1 million a year, and I do not like this contract. Peralta was a pretty highly thought of prospect in the Brewers system. He wasn't, a top 100 prospect, but I know that the Brewers thought highly of him. And look, he came up in 2018, didn't pitch bad, but wasn't a world beater. And last year, he was terrible. 5.29 ERA. Look, he went 7-3, which I like. But the ERA is ghastly. Moreover, where are you going to pitch him? Are you going to pitch him as a starter or a reliever? He came up as a starter, but last year he was coming out of the pen. If you're going to have him come out of the pen, I don't mind this. But I'd be very surprised if the Brewers lock this guy up knowing that he's going to be a reliever of the future. I think they want to try him as a starter, and I don't think that's going to go well. Now, look, they still have the option of putting him in the bullpen. He's been better there. He's been able to get his velocity up, and that's where his future is. But if they're going to have him as a starter, I don't like this deal. I'd have also liked it if Peralta proved himself a little bit more before they gave him this extension. Moving on now to college basketball, and I'll start with Penn State, Iowa. That is the first of the 4 games this weekend that will feature 2 ranked teams. And I talked about Penn State a little earlier this week. I'll put a finer point on them since I really didn't go too into it. You know, I spoke about how they narrowly beat Rutgers, but I didn't go crazy into them. Their offense is really good, but their defense isn't bad. It's not great, it's just good. Their offense is great, their defense is good. Patrick Chambers has never been a really good coach. In fact, he's been a bad coach at Penn State. It's amazing how he's lasted this long, but I give him credit for putting together a system that's resulted in Penn State being a top 25 team. Lamar Stevens and Myrion Jones have had really good years. Isaiah Brockington, coming off the bench, has been an effective weapon for him. And this is a Penn State team that could surprise some people next month. But when you look at Iowa, I've said it a million times, Luka Garza is so talented. Scream out who his player comp is. See if you remember. Jaren Jackson Jr., good job. Or if you didn't get him, then pay more attention to me. My God. Garza is immensely talented. We all know this. Fran McCaffrey's a really good coach. Iowa has a great offense, but a lousy defense. Joe Wieskamp does need to get his act together. He didn't play great the last time Iowa played a ranked team. That was against MSU on Tuesday, and they lost. So, Wieskamp will need to step up. CJ Frederick, I'd like to get a little more involved when it comes to him shooting. He's a good three-point shooter. He has range. He just needs to do it more. It's going to be interesting to see how Iowa responds to losing to a really good MSU team. And it's going to be interesting to see how Penn State does after narrowly beating a good Rutgers team. One other thing that you got to keep in mind about this game is Jones and Frederick are game-time decisions. Jones is sick, and Frederick has an ankle injury. So, assuming they both play, which is a big assumption, Iowa will win. But if Jones plays and Frederick doesn't, I'm going to pick the Nittany Lions. Moving on now to the SEC and Auburn versus Kentucky. It's been a while since I've talked about Bruce Pearl's team, a Final Four team last year, and they've picked up right where they've left off. I don't know if this team is better than last year's team, but I'll tell you what, this is a very, very talented Auburn team. They have different players, but Bruce Pearl is one of the best coaches in the nation. Samir Dowdy's really the only holdover, but he has Isaac Okoro, who I think can be a late lottery pick. Javon McCormick is having a good year. And Austin Wiley is one of the better big men in the nation. He is massively underrated because he is playing with 3 really talented players. The thing that I'm not crazy about when it comes to Auburn is their defense. Their offense is better this year than it was last year, but their defense is exponentially worse. They do not have a defensive stopper. Wiley is a solid shot blocker, but he's not a world beater out there. They also don't hit their free throws for whatever it's worth. So if this game gets down to a free throw battle, edge Kentucky. And if this game goes down to a battle of 3-pointers, edge Kentucky, even though Kentucky really only has 1 3-point shooter, and that's Emmanuel Quickley. But playing behind Quickley are 3 really talented players in Tyrese Maxey, who could be a late lottery pick also, Nick Richards, and Ashton Hagans. It's amazing that it's taken me this long to talk about Kentucky this year. This is a Kentucky team that's very capable of going on a deep run. They're not the most balanced team in the nation, but they are balanced. You don't need me to extol John Calipari's virtues or vices, as the case may be. Actually, it's funny. The Champions Classic this year was at Madison Square Garden, and it was on Election Day. So I voted earlier, and I went into the Garden at night. I went by myself, actually. I wanted to see the 4 best teams in the nation. And it was Kansas versus Duke in the early game, which Duke narrowly won 68-66, and MSU Kentucky was the late game. Kentucky won 69-62. So the number 2 team beat the number 1 team, and the number 4 team beat the number 3 team. Anyway, the reason why I'm bringing that up is because I was sitting next to someone who lived in Kentucky, but I think she rooted for Duke. I don't remember off the top of my head, but she did not like Calipari. I know she lived in Kentucky, but she did not like John Calipari, and I don't blame her. Calipari is a smart guy, but he's Bill Belichick. He just bends the rules a lot. Every school that he's been at, there have been scandals. It's very tough to respect John Calipari. He also screwed over the Nets by taking Kerry Kittles over Kobe Bryant. I was listening to my Kobe tribute the other day. I actually think I did a pretty good job with that, not to toot my own horn or anything, but then again, if I'm not going to toot my own horn, who is? But back to this game. This is going to be a fantastic game. It's going to be a close game. Kentucky will win, but Auburn is going to make him sweat. I brought up MSU a little earlier, so I'll go to them now. They're facing Maryland tomorrow. And I already talked about MSU this week. I'll go through them quickly. Again, Cassius Winston is one of the better players in the nation. He can shoot. He can penetrate. Really talented player. There's a role for him in the NBA in the future. Xavier Tillman is one of the most underrated players in the nation. He averages a double-double. and the two of them are a very formidable dynamic duo. If you want to call them a tremendous trio with Aaron Henry, you can. For MSU to make a big run in March, they're going to need Henry to step up big. As good as Winston and Tillman are, they can't do it by themselves. Henry has to be the third guy. And the great Tom Izzo is going to need to find a way to get him more involved. Although, granted, he's Tom Izzo. He'll find a way to do it. MSU is an incredibly balanced team. Maryland looks to grind you out defensively. They're not going to win too many 82-80 games. They're going to look to win 60 to 58 games. The ultimate irony about that is they actually have some talented scorers in Anthony Cowan, Jalen Smith, and Aaron Wiggins. But Mark Turgeon will praise them more for their defense. Cowan is really good at getting steals. Jalen Smith is one of the best shot blockers in the nation. Wiggins is also good at getting steals, and Darryl Morsell is good at getting steals also. If you love defensive basketball, you're going to like watching Maryland. I'm glad that the Boo Birds have stopped raining down on Mark Turgeon. I like Turgeon. I think he's a very good coach. And he would be out of a job for 2 seconds if he were to be fired by Maryland. Having said that, though, MSU is more balanced than Maryland. It's kind of funny. If Maryland looks to make this game a shootout, I think they have the edge. But I don't think they're going to. I think they're going to look to try to grind MSU out, and I don't think that's going to end well for them. If this is a high-scoring game, Maryland will win, but if it's a low-scoring game, which I think it will be, the Spartans will win, even though it's in Maryland. I'm going with MSU. The last game that I want to talk about today is an old rivalry. A rivalry that's been going on for years. It's a lot better on the gridiron than it is on the hardwood. But this is going to be a really good game. Michigan versus OSU. I love watching Michigan play. The reason being, you never know who's going to step up for them. One game it could be Isaiah Livers. The next game it's Xavier Simpson. The next game it's John Teskey, Franz Wagner, Eli Brooks. I'm not going to call them the Fab Five, but this could be the best starting five in the nation. There is no other team that could roll out 5 starters that can kill you on any given day. Brooks may not play, though. He's still dealing with a nose issue that he's been dealing with for the past 5 days. So, it's going to be interesting to see if he tries to push through it. He may wear a mask. It'll be interesting to see how that affects him. But even if he doesn't, Michigan still has 4 guys that can kill you. Juwan Howard has done a fantastic job in coming back to his alma mater. And when you look at OSU, they have 1 great player and 2 really good players. Caleb Wesson is their great player. Wouldn't surprise me at all if he became a really good player in the NBA. And he's got 2 really good running mates in Dwayne Washington Jr. and DJ Carton. I give OSU credit for being able to withstand their injuries. The one thing that I'll say is I want Washington and Carton in the starting lineup. I know they play in crunch time, but I want them out there more. I don't know if he's going to play, though, because he took some time off to focus on his mental health, which, good for him. He has every right to do that. I commend him for it. But he hasn't played in about a month. So, if he plays, OSU has a better shot in this game. But if he doesn't, I don't see how they win. I'm going to go with the Wolverines here. I do want to talk about a death that just came to my attention, and that is the death of Johnny Antonelli. He may not be the most household name in the world, but from 1953 to 1960, he was one of the best pitchers in the National League and was one of the better pitchers in all of baseball. He was signed out of high school, a local high school in Rochester called Jefferson High School. And that may not seem notable today, but back then there was no MLB draft. He was signed in 1948. The MLB draft didn't become a thing until 1965. Pop quiz, you know who the first overall pick in that draft was? Who the first pick in MLB draft history was? Rick Monday, former Oakland Athletic. He was a good player, actually. So with no MLB draft, these bonus babies, as they were called, were in essence free agents. They were free to go to the highest bidder. It wasn't territorial. They could go to any team that they wanted. And the Braves signed him for $52,000. That is the equivalent of over $556,000 in today's money. While that may not seem like a lot of money today, it is the biggest bonus in baseball history. And there were a lot of players that did not like him. Johnny Sane, famously, did not like Antonelli. The Braves won the World Series in Antonelli's rookie year. They beat the Indians in 6 games. But when the Braves voted on how to divide their World Series share, even though Antonelli was on the team, granted, he didn't do much. He only pitched in 4 games. He was mainly a batting practice pitcher, but still, he was on the team. The Braves voted to exclude him from getting any of the pot. I'm sure he appreciated that. In 49, he got a little more experience. He mainly appeared out of the bullpen, but he was a solid pitcher. 3-7, which isn't that impressive, but a 3.56 ERA. For a 19-year-old who never saw a minor league game in his life, that's pretty good. In 1950, he did not have a good year, and he then served in the Army. He never saw battle. He was stationed in Virginia, and in 1953 he came back and pitched really well for the then Milwaukee Braves. Went 12-12 with a 3.18 ERA. But he was never well liked by Braves fans or Braves players. They didn't like the fact that a bonus baby got that much money, and it was an expectation that he was never able to shake for the Braves. So he was traded to the Giants for Bobby Thompson. The full trade is Antonelli, Billy Klaus, Don Little, Ebba St. Clair, and $50,000 to the Giants for Bobby Thompson and Sam Calderon. I'm sure Antonelli appreciated being traded from one bad situation right into another one. You're traded for the guy who won the Giants the 1951 pennant. Antonelli lived up to it, though, and immediately made his mark with the Giants. In '54, he made his first All-Star team. He won 21 games, had a 2.3 ERA, to go with 6 shutouts. And in the '54 World Series against the Indians, Antonelli started Game 2 and pitched a complete game. The Giants won 3-1. And in the decisive Game 4, Antonelli got the save. He pitched 1 2/3 innings on 1 day's rest. So that immediately washed away any bad blood that there may have been from Giants fans that didn't like Bobby Thompson being traded. And all throughout Antonelli's career with the Giants, he was a really good pitcher. I'll rattle through his stats really fast. 55, 14-16 with a 3.33 ERA. 56, 20-13, 2.86 ERA. He was an all-star. 12-18, 3.77 ERA. I understand that the win-loss records aren't that impressive when you look at 55 and 57, but those were really bad Giants teams. In '58, the Giants' first year in San Francisco, Antonelli didn't miss a beat. He went 16-13 with a 3.28 ERA and was an all-star. In '59, he went 19-10 with a 3.10 ERA, led the National League in shutouts with 4, and was an all-star. Even in 1960, when he was used more in a closer-type role, he still went 6-7 with a 3.77 ERA and 11 saves. He was very comfortable pitching out of the bullpen. But after that season, he was traded to the Indians with Willie Kirkland for Harvey Keene in what was a blockbuster trade at the time. You really gotta wonder what the Indians were thinking there. Trader Frank Lane didn't meet a player that he didn't want to trade, and he gave Harvey Keene away after trading the very popular Rocky Colavito for him. That really spelled the end of his career. He was terrible with the Indians. He went back to the Braves. He was terrible there. He actually was almost an original Met, but he never suited up for him. And he retired because he wanted to spend more time with his family. He was 89 years old when he passed today. May he rest in peace. On Monday, you'll get a New York Islanders show and the Jacob Valk show as per usual. I hope you have a good weekend. Until next time, I am Jacob Valk saying that I don't know why baseball players celebrate with champagne. It doesn't taste good, and it stings the eyes. They should use milk instead. Hell, even half and half would be better.